So welcome everyone. It's a beautiful day out. I think we are deserving these days. So it's we'll get our meeting done.
I'm all stuck on Zoom looking at a screen. That's great.
I know. Well, I will tell you that I was very tempted to go out into the back patio and have it out there, other than the fact that then it reminded me as one of the garbage trucks went by and downshifted that it wouldn't be very fair for everyone else. But it was beautiful out there. Anyway, so welcome. So as a call to order, and I would like to just have people approve the minutes from this last month. If you've had the opportunity to review those minutes, can I
Motion
Make a motion to approve.
Excellent.
Second.
Very good. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
I think we're there, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we are.
All right. Okay.
And
Very good.
just for the record, I think I'm recording this, but just in case there are folks phoning in or whatever, this is the Economic Development Commission meeting of April 8th, which is a special meeting at 8:30. We have Chairman Lesko and Commission members Steve Rosado, David Fogel, and Elif Fatherly, as well as Don Peterson on the call that I can see. There may be others. And if so, if I missed anyone, let me know.
Excellent. Sorry about that little part of the protocol.
Yeah, it's one of these weird Zoom things, I think.
Right. All right. Collectively. Well, Mark, what would you like to first talk about? The update on the COVID?
So, I didn't arrange for a speaker this morning, so you'll just have to suffer through me providing an update. But I would, if anyone has any suggestions for future guest speakers, I'm more than happy to entertain those. I am working with both universities. We typically ask a representative of both Fairfield and Sacred Heart University to attend one of our meetings and provide an update as to what's going on that we should be aware of on campus. And so I'm working to arrange that. So hopefully we'll have somebody for May or subsequent months, depending on their schedules. But if there are other topics, we've had folks from the arts and cultural community like John Reed from FTC, others appear just to provide updates, and I'm happy to address. So again, if anyone has suggestions, let me know. I wanted to give a very brief update on where we are with regard to the pandemic and the reopening plan. As you know, the governor has opened things up in terms of loosening some of the restrictions that some of the businesses have been operating under, notably restaurants. It was important to note, and I think Planning and Zoning did appreciate this, among others, that even with full return to 100% occupancy, with the social distancing restrictions in place, that means that businesses can't effectively use 100% of the space. So in light of that, the first select woman did, and working with Planning and Zoning and this office, did extend the outdoor dining allowances through the end of this season. So, we're dining permit process and certain variances in terms of not having an expectation they would have to satisfy parking requirements or maybe use some of their space more creatively to create outdoor dining opportunities. And we've had 45 plus restaurants take advantage of that. We typically have 60 restaurants to begin with that have approved outdoor dining locations in town, so it's not something that is particularly foreign here, but 45 restaurants took advantage of the loosened regulations, either expanded or created new outdoor dining locations. And it was roughly half and half, or a little bit more in terms of those that established new outdoor dining locations because of the pandemic. So the first selectman extended that through the end of the season, and then the legislature and governor did enact 6610, which is a bill that was pending. I think it may still be waiting the governor's signature, but the whole point was that made it essentially statewide, extending the governor's allowances for outdoor dining statewide. So we're seeing this movement. There is a bill actually pending before the General Assembly that would make some of those changes more permanent. I'm not sure how I feel about those, but some of those I think are best left to local zoning authorities, for better or for worse, in terms of determining what the impact would be. But it's important to note that we do have a number of businesses that continue to be impacted by the pandemic, regardless of whether or not we've now allowed folks to go back to full occupancy and that type.
Mark, I'm just curious, like who polices I've been out a couple places and I felt safe and whatnot, but like I've seen like the bar pretty packed and like the tables pretty much on top of each other in a couple places I don't want to name, but I felt like, hey, I could always get up and leave if I'm not comfortable, but I was just more curious as to how that is policed.
Well, I think it's policed based on complaints. I don't know that we're having folks going out and keeping distance between tables from a regulatory standpoint. I mean, when they provide us plans, there is an indication on the floor plan as to the appropriate layout of the location and distancing. And I know initially when they set it up, that may be the case, but things get moved around. So unless there's a complaint generated, we're not out necessarily looking for that. And I think we probably rely upon, like you said, most people to make a judgment for themselves. And that's probably what's impacting, gyms and things like that, whether people are comfortable going into an space, even with mask and distancing and things of that nature. People have to make a decision for themselves as to whether or not that's something they feel comfortable doing, even with the vaccine rollout. So it's complaint driven, the bottom line. And if we get a complaint, we'll go out and talk to them. I think we'll try to have a light. We understand everyone's trying to do the best they can, so we try to have a light imprint. Some are better than others. There's always 10% that create 90% of the problems. That's true. That's true wherever you are.
Right.
I will. The other thing we've done is, I thought things were dying down. We provided business grants, used some of the money from the CARES Act, quite a bit of it in the first tranche, and then some of the monies in the second round to provide small business grants. And our approach was really to target those very small businesses, mom and pops, that hadn't been helped through PPP or EIDL for whatever reason. They just found it difficult to navigate, or So, half of the businesses that we've helped thus far were not assisted in a meaningful way through other federal or state programs. So I think we did hit that head on, and we've done 72 grants thus far, totaling $279,000. So the grants are not huge. They're on average a little less than $4,000, but they're helpful in helping meet some of the extraordinary costs that some of these small businesses face. So I thought things were dying down, and Don, you were representative on the grant review committee, but yesterday I received 4 new applications. So as much as we think, we've turned a corner and this is the worst of it's beyond us and everything's better, businesses continue to be impacted by it. So if you know businesses that are impacted or suffering, please don't hesitate to give my number. And if our program doesn't work for them, I'll try to connect them to other resources that can help. So there are a lot of things out there.
On that topic, Mark, have you had any word this new round of the 1.9 trillion? What is funneling down? Ultimately, what is funneling down to our town and to you to use as a resource? Do you have any idea at this point?
Well, we're still getting information from Fed. Funds can be best utilized. There are some guidelines. It seems to me that they're trying to provide a little bit more flexibility than they have in the past, so that communities can determine how best to address community needs, which is a good thing. So I know we're working with the first selectwoman's office and the chief administrative officer and the chief financial officer to navigate that process. There's quite a bit of conversation taking place within the economic development community. It would seem that there's some major investments, and I know there's also a push to make investments in infrastructure. And we have no shortage of infrastructure projects here that do have an economic development tint to them. I'm thinking the improvements to the wastewater treatment plant, the East Trunks sewer upgrades, all of which are significant. And we were able to get a grant for the East Trunk sewer, but that went from a $2.5–3 million project to a $7.5 million project, of which we have $750,000 in a grant from the state and $2.5 million committed thus far from the town through the WCCA. So, but there's no doubt that this stuff has to happen, because without it, we don't have the capacity to handle new investment, new development in that area. And that trunk sewer takes 60% of the sewage flow in town, including most of our commercial areas along Black Rock Turnpike, Tungsten Hill, and Commerce Drive area. So if we're going to see new economic development activity, new investment, business growth, we've got to address some of these infrastructure. And the same can be said for roads and bridges. When we talk about, people have talked about how we can better leverage the assets that the town owns near the downtown train station. You can't really do any kind of new development or investment there without addressing the choke point that is the five-legged intersection at Mill Plain and Post Road. And, I'm no engineer, but, if you have to widen that viaduct and that crossing where Metro North comes across Mill Plain and fix that intersection so it functions better, that's a big ticket item. I'm guessing that's many tens of millions of dollars to do that project. And that doesn't exist at the local level. It can only help, to have state dollars leverage there. So,
Right.
when the state said, how can we facilitate POD? I said, as if we don't, we can't further any of this growth happen. So I'm hopeful that some of this money will actually be directed to address it.
Yeah. Mark, you're breaking up a little bit on me. I'm not sure if it's
I'm
everyone
sorry.
else, but no, it's okay. But I might have missed what was the actual amount that were projected?
I'm not entirely sure at this point. I'll get that for you. I know the chief financial officer and CAO have that information. So I'll it's a pretty big number. So I think they're looking to try to address some of our one-time capital costs, which otherwise would have to be funded here locally.
Right.
I think they're sensitive to the fact that if you fund operating expenses with a one-time cash infusion, you create a problem down the road.
Right.
And so some of these investments that have been long stalled, it might be a good idea. And that will help save the local taxpayers, because then we don't have to finance it ourselves.
Right. These non-reoccurring costs, right? Not a non-operational, non-reoccurring costs. So, I mean, is it in the tens of millions? It's
a big number. Yes.
Okay.
I don't want to venture. I don't want to do a guess here.
Okay. All right. I won't press anymore. Fair enough. All right. So does anyone else have any questions regarding what is going on presently with efforts for pandemic relief? Or can we maybe move on to status of the comprehensive economic development strategy?
Yeah, and I'm not sure why this is breaking up. I've had, it must be the town issues here where I am, but in terms of the sets, the consultant working with the regional planning agency has completed initial market analysis, and hopefully, that'll be, I can share that with you because it's more information. They are working to arrange stakeholder interviews and focus group sessions with business leaders. And as you know, there was a survey that was done both from the resident base as well as the businesses that are located in the 6-town region. So they're underway. Again, the importance of the SEDS really from a town perspective, aside from it making sense to have a regional plan as to how we're addressing economic development priorities, is also that it does open up possibilities in the future to get some of the funding through EDA, for which a set the prerequisite. So there are federal grant opportunities that we might avail ourselves of once we have the stats approved.
Again, do you think those grants will be further enhanced by this this recent act with the 1.9 trillion?
I don't know how those, I don't know how those funds will be forthcoming, but it can't hurt. It cannot hurt.
Okay. I mean, I guess my point across the board is ultimately we're all going to have to pay this back. We might as well make sure that we grab our share that we can work with locally. Is I guess my point. So
yeah.
All right. How about any other discussion on this?
Well, I guess, but it's going to flow through the state, right? Essentially. And so the state, the governor, I guess, is going to decide ultimately how that money is going to be spent on the state level. I assume, Mark, right? We don't.
Some of it, yes. But there's a good chunk of it, a fairly sizable amount that is actually flowing directly to the towns and cities. So Fairfield will have a pretty good amount of money that we can then use as we see fit to address community needs. There will be a bigger pot of money, obviously, for the state than used to address issues or priorities statewide. But the nice thing about this program is money's flowing directly into localities, and a pretty good. I will get the exact amount, Kevin. I just didn't want to be on record and provide information.
Understand.
And Mark, that money is automatically earmarked. It's not a grant process where you have to go through applications, or that's part of it as well. Because I know for like education and libraries that they're having to seek, an application process to get funding.
It is both. It is both. We were approached. There's a separate process that each member of Congress is soliciting projects or proposed projects that could be considered for funding. That is a competitive process, which is independent from the monies that are towns and cities and states. But there will be both competitive grant funding opportunities as well as monies that are directed for our use to address the pandemic. And I think what we're all struggling with is to better understand what the rules are before we make those investment decisions.
Right.
It seems pretty clear that they have to be somewhat related to the pandemic. We were told that it can't be used to provide direct tax relief, if you will, to retire debt or things of that nature. But, indirectly, obviously, all this will have a benefit in that, we don't have to fund some of those investments ourselves or 100% ourselves, which would have a beneficial effect down the road in terms of what our tax rates might be, because otherwise it'd be on us completely.
Right, and it can hold our future costs, so therefore
Yeah.
it actually is indirectly, as you said, paying down or holding back certain debt and
Yeah.
cost of service of debt.
I mean,
Okay.
and I will say this, similar to the other, if there are particular issues out there that you're seeing, or challenges that we face or things, and we can have a conversation about that, because I think the more things we put into the hopper and at least start talking about it, the better off from a community standpoint.
So I would challenge our fellow commissioners to open your eyes a little more and come up with some ideas. And maybe what we do is our next meeting next month, we draw some of those ideas back to Mark. Many of which he'll probably have already had a circle around the idea, but there might be some peripheral things that he did not see that he can maybe move forward, and we can talk more about.
So
Does
I
that
have
make
a
sense?
question. Yeah, so I have a question, Mark. I was also wondering, like, has the town lost money from things like parking, like at the train station due to COVID, because most people are working from home? Like, I just don't know what's happening with that. Like, are people still paying for their parking, or are they not? Or, I'm just thinking for the future, obviously we're going to need to figure out how to fill that gap financially, right? As a state, like, I mean,
Yeah.
as a town.
Mhm. There has been a revenue impact. It's not as significant perhaps as other areas, because the revenues for local services, including education, are generated by property tax. But fees for services obviously did see a hit. There was a period of time. It's rebounded in terms of licensing and other conveyance fees and things of that nature. But for example, for the downtown businesses, we have a permit program. It doesn't generate a significant amount of revenue, and it goes into a segregated pot for downtown improvements. But we waived permit fees for the last year, because I didn't feel right about charging businesses, even a modest, $30 a month permit fee for parking downtown under the circumstances. So there is a revenue loss. It's not huge. It's certainly not as acute, as not as significant as other places that are more dependent upon those revenue streams, but it definitely had an effect. The good news, and how we started this conversation is I've seen, I don't know about you, but I've seen an uptick in activity, new businesses coming into town, inquiries in terms of commercial space, commercial building permits. So all of these tend to suggest that things are improving. The conditions are improving. It's not ideal yet, but things are trending in the right direction. I don't know about you guys, but that's what I'm seeing.
No, it's true. I'm seeing a lot more foot traffic in downtown. Especially during the afternoon and evenings, especially if you have these nicer days, people are definitely getting out. People are taking advantage of their outside a little more, especially with this warmer weather. So, okay, that's great. So, Mark, do we have any updates on any development sites or any particular pending applications that are of interest?
Yeah, two things I wanted to mention to you. Obviously, we had a great presentation last month from Jim Went and Emmeline Harrigan from Planning and Zoning, and they presented where things stand with the update to the town's master plan, the plan of conservation development. And I sent you a link to their presentation, which was adapted from other presentations that they did. So it looks a little confusing, but the slides I wanted to focus on were, I think, slides 11 through 15, which talked about through these workshops pre-pandemic related to economic development. And what I'd like to understand better from you is, what are the things that we want to prioritize in our conversations of planning and zoning? Because everything, you know, the way I look at it is everything kind of flows through this land use. The one thing that we have that controls development, obviously, is their land use and permitting process. So it's important to have policies that meet what our aspirations and goals are. And then obviously the regulations have to follow. But we have this once in a 10-year opportunity to address what those policies should look like. And what are we trying to achieve from an economic development perspective? And there's some things that I think are important that we address. I think parking, we should take a very close look at our parking requirements in commercial areas. I think we should look at, you know, whether or not some of our commercial corridors are structured properly to facilitate new investment and development. You know, Kings Highway is something I've looked at before. I think it's a very thin commercial corridor. It doesn't really allow for new commercial activity. And so maybe we want to look at whether or not zoning's appropriate for that location. Gateway sites, whether it's around the University Sacred Heart, you know, that area, whether we want to create a small neighborhood district there. Certainly the area between Southport and downtown has been mentioned, the Exide site being a key development opportunity. So there's a lot of different things that have been mentioned. I just wanted to get your feedback and perspective, things you think that we should be focused on and pushing planning and zoning to modify, or what you're hearing from businesses. As you know, signage and parking are the two things I hear all the time from a regulatory standpoint from small businesses. I don't know if, you know, again, you had any reflections on what you heard last month.
So I'd actually like to dovetail one of your thoughts, two of your thoughts together. One being that expanding the depth or ability for the Kings Highway area to have deeper lots for development, but that also has an issue with the flood zone mitigation that we, about a year and a half, or maybe even 2.5 years back, you and I spoke about, we all spoke about in this commission, about that section of the town has obviously a flood zone map that with certain amount of work, infrastructure work, it could pull a fair amount of space out of the flood zone and into better ability for development. So maybe this is an area that we can go and find some money for and do some work on, and then therefore have a better ability to develop that Kings Highway section. And at the same time, adding another a layer to what we were talking about with the master plan for peripheral properties that years ago were residential but make no sense being residential right now. They're sandwiched between all kinds of commercial either use, even if they're not commercial, like utilities or highways or railroad, but they are still residential. It should be made easier for those to become commercial capable, and therefore further adding to the depth of that area for development. Just a thought.
Thank you. Those are both good thoughts.
Mark, this is Don. It strikes me that there doesn't seem to be any consensus, or I don't even know if there's non-consensus as to what it is we want to have developed in town. So if we had a wish list and said, do we need transportation hubs for logistics support? I would say no. That's not something we would like to attract. We would like to attract small manufacturing, maybe. Would we like to have more retail mom and pop size stores, or we want to attract some big box stores? But I just don't recall a survey where people actually say this is what we want. We have plenty of anecdotal information as what people don't want. But I'm thinking that might be when we talk about ideas for how to spend the federal money, is that what is it we want to spend it on in terms of what sort of developments do we want to encourage? There seems to be resistance to 830G developments, but if not that, what is it we do want? Do we want more half-acre plots? Or so I guess that's what I'm wrestling with, is that we would like to grow the commercial list, but what do we want to grow it with?
Well, and I'll just add to that, you know, it sort of goes back to my comments at the last meeting. I mean, who is we? You know, when Don says that, and I don't mean to question Don, it's for all of us, but, you know, and he mentioned surveys. I mean, if you ask through a survey, you only get the people who respond to the survey to tell you what they think. And I just don't know that that's representative. To me, it should come from the top. It's the leadership to say, here's what we think our priorities are. And then go to the community and say, okay, get feedback, have sessions once those priorities are announced, and then you can adjust perhaps based on feedback. But you got to be careful, because who shows up could be a limited audience.
It always is.
Yeah, but but I agree with Don that, I mean, I think it starts with what are the top priorities, and then that influences things like parking. Although my question was going to be, I didn't understand. I'd love to hear what the parking issues are. It doesn't have to be in this meeting today necessarily, but I'm new to this, so I'd like to understand, because, I hear the same thing. There's no parking. I don't know what that, but first you start with what are the priorities? Is it more retail? Is it more commercial? Where? That kind of thing. And that can influence, well, what are the impediments to doing that? If parking is one of them, all right, then how do we solve that? But anyway, that's all.
Those are all good. To David's point, you do get a limited audience at any of these things, and I do think it's incumbent upon the town leadership to kind of chart a course, provide a suggested, this is where we think we're going and what we hope to accomplish, and then we have elections every so often, and we have other opportunities for the folks to comment on, whether or not they think that we're heading in the right direction or wrong direction. So I do think there is a part of that. The other issue I would say with, putting it out to a broader audience as to what do you think we should have is, oftentimes that may not match up very well with what the market supports.
That's a great point. I mean,
we all may want to have a certain thing, wouldn't it be great to have, this? Yeah, it'd be great, but there is no market for that. So we can put it there, and that's just not it's just not realistic.
It's also competitive with other towns as well. So, I mean, we may say like, we really want to focus on biotech, but we're competing with Westport and Stanford and everyone else. So
right,
it's a combination of, what you want and what the market wants. So it is very hard for water to find that level.
And
Free market capitalism.
And when you're doing a master plan too, you're really setting it up for a 10-year period of time. So it's a longer time horizon. So, there was a few years back when we had an influx of banks that wanted to occupy ground floor
Every block.
retail in the downtown core. And there was a big hubbub about, oh, we need to regulate out, so we can't have all these banks occupying this space that we otherwise would have restaurants or retail or that type of thing. And, people were saying, myself included, were saying, oh, just let's hold on. These things are cyclical. What we do from a land use perspective is allow a whole host of different commercial uses within that zone. We're not allowing industrial, like you wouldn't have heavy manufacturing in a commercial district where you have people walking past, but banks are allowed, restaurants are allowed, those types of things are all permitted. So we don't have to be as fine tuned as maybe Don's suggesting with what kind of retail use do we want, or retail versus office, because our commercial districts allow both. And we want to be flexible because within that 10 or 20 year period of time, the market changes. And so you want to be able to adapt, take advantage of those opportunities as they present themselves, as long as they're not inconsistent with what your overall vision or goal is for the downtown or for other commercial areas in town. But, to your point, we only have a limited amount of our space that's zoned for the commercial grand list. We need to think about strategically about how we best do that, or that growth should occur, and what kind of uses should we be, trying to accommodate. So I think these are all good.
That might be a good topic for the, if you're getting anyone from the universities, just sort of like the majors that they're focusing in. And I know like Sacred Heart was looking at adding sort of aerospace program and a few other things, but you tend to get, students stay behind, and maybe to sort of dovetail with the universities they're specializing in as they're growing might be informative.
I mean, I guess before we make changes, I mean, we should at some point evaluate all the businesses and try to understand what they bring and the value they bring, not only in terms of the value they bring financially, but for example, when you drive into Fairfield, you see that cigar shop. I'm always thinking like, why is that? Like, do people go there? I don't see that many people going in there. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what you're welcome into Fairfield with. There's a cigar shop here, then there's this kind of, it's kind of inconsistent. And I'm just wondering if we should probably think about evaluating, what we have already first, because, just to see like how do we redefine ourselves as Fairfield? We're a beach town, but we've got all these other things going on.
Yep. So I'd imagine those kinds of businesses will ultimately be priced out. It's what happens as we are successful with the downtown, and it pushes outward, and the rents rise and rise. Typically, you'll see those kind of businesses peripherally, but eventually they get pushed out as well. There are some troubled properties that are just very awkward properties, therefore they can't be rented very often or at the premium rates, and those are the ones that typically you'll see those smaller businesses go into. I don't think you can really regulate them out per se. I think that's a whole other issue. I think from a free market capitalism position, it'll work itself out. It's just as Mark said, it's just kind of a broader stroke over decades, not necessarily over years per se.
I think it's a bank situation again. So
yes,
there was a big reaction to it. It blew itself out because then banks started to retrench and consolidate, and they no longer want, no longer as important to have storefront bank retail locations. So, sometimes it's the best action is not to do anything immediately and react to the current trend. Just wait for things to pull out.
So, is there anything else pertaining to this topic, or do we want to move on? I think Beverly's not here today, right? She couldn't make it today.
She is not. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. Did she mention anything that wanted to be brought up, or do you have anything that you can help her with?
No, we're working with the chamber on an upcoming retail event, oriented event to support our retail base downtown specifically. So we continue to do those. We try to do those judiciously so that, you know, we participate in about 4 or 5 of these events each year where we take the lead. And I think it's important for our small business retail mercantile base, but again, you could have a whole staff devoted to doing nothing but that, and there are places that do that. We just can't. We don't have the luxury of doing that here. We've got other priorities to address.
Sure. Okay.
The only thing I will mention, you know, for new businesses coming up, I'm sure many of you have seen the construction taking place at the former Kohl's location on 290 Tungus Hill Road. There is you know, both those locations are occupied. We have Floor and Decor, which is a Georgia-based retailer that's making a push into the Northeast. This will be the second location in Connecticut outside of, you know, Danbury's the other one. And they have announced a June ribbon cutting date, so they're planning on an opening in mid-June. Aldi's grocery store or market is the second one I know. They have a very loyal, devoted following, and they've been looking for a site in town for many, many years. And they will follow suit. So they'll have an opening before the end of the summer. So those of you who are big fans of Aldi's, you know, stay tuned to that. We do have an application that's recently been filed for the former Joe's American site on Post Road. You know, I think it'll go through a code review initially before a formal application's made, but it's a well-known fast casual restaurant chain that is taking the site. Again, they have a very loyal fan base, so I'm sure that'll be very well received when it's announced.
Does it have anything to do with Talladega Nights?
I don't know that reference, Kevin, but I don't think I can say it publicly yet on the call. They didn't put the name on the plans, so I guess maybe I'm not at liberty.
Is it a TGI Fridays?
No, it is not. It is not.
That's for Applebees.
It is known for not having restaurants open on Sunday, if that helps.
Okay, there we go. All right, fair enough.
Oh,
I think I know it. I got it. Say no more.
Yeah, I think I got that one.
Right.
So, all right.
And the only other one is across the street. The gas station is making their way in for an application, and that's a more regional, higher end pizza type restaurant concept that you know they're looking to convert the service station as part of their whole marketing for their business concept. So it's, you know, it's a great use for that site. It's a very small site, but it's nice to see something positive happening for that because it's been vacant for a number of years.
So the building behind it, was there any concept or movement to knock that down and add parking?
They're working with the funeral home to provide additional parking for the restaurant, but they're not, you know, there was talk at one point about whether or not, you know, they could aggregate parcels and do something bigger.
Yeah.
That didn't work out.
Yeah.
But the other uses really were another service station or a quickie mart. So, you know, I'd rather have.
No, that's fair.
You know, we've got 40 of them in town, so.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Those
But
of you who are big fans of Sally's of Pizza, they finally did pull their building permit earlier this year and it's starting work. So they've
good.
renting
that's good.
trademark, but they're going to take the barbacoa space, and so we'll have Pepe's at one end, Sally's at the other. And I talked to a couple of the property owners there, and I said, well, all you need now is Modern or Libby's Italian Ice, and we'll be all set. You know, little New Haven we got there.
New Haven South.
Well,
Right.
And then IKEA.
Can you
have a
find a
Swedish
big
meatballs,
enough
you know.
site to accommodate IKEA? No, I don't. We've got a big retailer looking for a site. We can't find them a space here. You know, we just don't have big, you know, 6+ acre parcels of land. You know, even the Exide piece, which is almost 6 acres is just not an ideal, it's not a rectangular spot
Right.
for a big box. And I don't think you'd want a big box there anyway.
No, that's true. Okay, any other business? Any other other items that anyone else wants to bring before the floor? Okay, all right. That's great. Well,
Thank you all.
Yes.
Thank you all for your patience and
yes. So a motion to close the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Excellent. Second.
Second.
All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate
thank
it.
you all. I'll get back to you
Marco.
with some other information.
Mark, I'll reach out to you. Thanks.
Okay,
everyone.
great. Thanks.
Bye-bye.